Hello, my friends. Happy holidays. I am here with Donna Kush. She is the president and CEO of the Omaha Community Foundation. Donna, welcome and good to see you.
Thank you. Always good to see you, Andy. Thanks for having me.
Can you believe we're almost at the end of 2021?
No.
It's been another crazy year, but there's some great things going on at the Omaha Community Foundation, and also wanted to talk to you about end of year giving. But let's just tell us, what is the Omaha Community Foundation?
Sure. We are the Community Foundation is an organization that really focuses on that word community. So we're connectors in the community, connectors with nonprofits and our own grant making, but also nonprofits, and then the fund holders that we have at the Community Foundation. And we help connect our fund holders with giving tools, donor advised funds, our charitable checkbook, other types of funds and offerings that we have, and then help connect them with the information and expertise that we're out there gathering every day in the community about nonprofits and the services they offer. So we really see ourselves as a connector, a convener, collaborator for the community.
Absolutely. So one of the questions, we've got some talking points here. Let's talk about end of year giving and what advantage does end of year giving have for donors?
So, over a third of charitable giving is done in the last 3 months of the year. And the majority of that by far is in December. I think people are just really focused a lot on their finances as they, get to the end of the year, and they're thinking about, tax consequences and tax planning and things like that. And so what we're really, we kind of gear up from Thanksgiving to the end of the year. It's really our peak season here at the Community Foundation. And we help people find those tools that are most appropriate for the type of giving that they'd like to do, for tax planning purposes or otherwise, for future giving. So, one of our key tools is our donor advised fund, and that allows people to be really efficient with their giving. And from a tax planning standpoint, it's a great tool because they can be very efficient. They can make one donation and that deduction is effective immediately. And then it's really works great when people have stock equities that they may have a low basis on, because then it's kind of a twofold benefit that they're able to take the, if it has a low basis, there's some definite tax benefits then to giving that to us as a 501c3. And then there's that immediacy again that I just mentioned. And there's also the ability then when you give it to a 501c3, you get the full appreciation. You don't have to worry about the capital gains piece of it.
Yeah. So lots of little things to consider as people are looking at the end of the year. So let's talk a little bit about philanthropic trends. What philanthropic trends should people be paying attention to?
We have seen continued high giving, high gifts into the Community Foundation, and high grants going out, a continuation of what happened during the pandemic. And we're seeing that definitely continue. In fact, I think there's a statistic from one of the national organizations that donor advised funds in specifically had almost like a 1/3 jump in giving out of the value of the grants that were coming out of there. So we're continuing to see a lot of focus on that, and people being very focused and strategic with their giving. Also, I would say one thing that came out of the pandemic that we're continuing to see is a focus on sustainability, both within nonprofits themselves, who I think it really sort of just made people have to sit back and think, wow, this is a situation nobody saw coming. And even if you were for-profit or nonprofit, it really made you think about, how are you planning for the future? And are you prepared for something that might be a bit of a setback? So sustainability is really important and a focus for nonprofits. It's also something that is a focus for donors, for our fund holders as well. They're looking at organizations and really wanting to know how they're making themselves sustainable as well. Two other trends that we see a lot and hear a lot of right now too are the focus on data and results,
Yeah.
and people really wanting to, and I think this is great, and we encourage this at the Community Foundation. Donors and fund holders think of their charitable giving as investments, and they want to know that they're making a good investment with that money. If an organization is struggling, that doesn't mean that they aren't going to invest in that. They may still do that, but they also want to know that there's that sustainability plan, there's a plan for the future, those type of things. And then even if an organization is doing really well, donors and fund holders, much like an investment, want to make sure that people aren't going to be complacent, that they have good plans in place.
Yeah.
And so data and results are really important, which is why we've put a lot of focus into kind of revamping our landscape website that we have. And actually the website is now condensed into our one website, but more importantly, we've really put a focus on, our areas that we like to talk about, those focus areas, and pulling data from public sources as well as our own, and presenting those statistics and numbers so people can really look at where are those areas of need. The other trend that we're seeing and hearing a lot about everywhere is wealth transfer. So there is going to be, a significant amount of wealth that'll be transferring. And the Nebraska Community Foundation just released their study talking about the 100 million for the state, 22 million in particular for Douglas County that would be transferring over the next decade or so. And we definitely see and hear more about that at the Community Foundation.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about, I want to talk about the Fund for Omaha. This is something that this last, it just was announced, $525,000 of grant funding to 23 local organizations. But tell us about what this fund is. Is it new? Has it been around for a while?
It has been around for quite a while. In fact, in the last 33 years, we've given out about $8 million total from the Fund for Omaha. And in 2020, we've switched the focus to be on areas that were under-resourced, and particularly leaders in those areas of those nonprofits who are persons of color. Typically these leaders do not have the same access to philanthropic resources that white leaders may have. And so we really wanted to help provide a better connection for them, allow a little bit more focus on them. And so we've really, put some emphasis on that to help ensure that we're helping these organizations be sustainable, not just short term, but long term.
And do people apply for this? I'm actually looking at the grant. I'm looking at your website over here, the grant recipients. Can you just walk us through the process of applying for this, or what the process is?
Yeah, there's definitely an application process involved in that. And the funding priorities are arts and culture, neighborhoods, economic opportunity, health, transportation, and vibrant communities, with that overarching emphasis again on the social equity piece of it. So organizations can apply, they can reach out to us, before applying, and get some help and coaching from us on what will make a good application, the kinds of things that we look for in that. But we've really just seen, especially recently, a lot of requests come in for that arts and culture and health, which is no surprise. Those were the areas really highly impacted through the pandemic. So yeah, they can apply, and then and we encourage them to reach out and ask us, support during that too.
And that's great, because a lot of times, they're unsure of, what makes a good application. What are you looking for? And that's great that you have that resource for them. So they have funds.
Yeah. And the other thing too, Andy, is that So we also run kind of we run a similar, well, we run a program, community interest funds.
Mhm.
And so it's another reason for people, for nonprofits to reach out to us so that they can help get a little guidance on, well, should I be applying for fund for Omaha or community interest funds? Because our community interest funds, those are a group of funds which are really unique, unique not just in Omaha, but in the nation. We see others coming and looking at us for the structure and the model that we've set up, but they're resident-led grant making, which means that the people from within those communities are the ones making the decisions on who will receive the grants. So we have our African American fund, we have our Latino fund, our Equality Fund for our LGBTQIA plus community. We have a refugee fund and a neighborhood grants. So those residents from within those communities are the ones who are making the decisions. So again, reach out to us and we'll help guide you on in which program. And the same is true for, funders and donors too. We encourage them to reach out to us to find out what kinds of information is bubbling up as we go through this grant process.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of need and a lot of different areas of need. So having you as a resource and really being able to help people through that, nonprofit or donors or businesses or whatnot, to really kind of align what the person wants and the nonprofits out there who are, in that category. So important. So I'm going to back up a little bit on our questions. How can people, again, support local nonprofits this year? I think the pandemic really, it kind of shined a light in areas that we just hadn't been looking at. So it's been an interesting year as we come on to, this is the second holiday season going into the second new year, so to speak, of the pandemic. So what are your thoughts on that? How can people help?
Yeah, there are so many different ways. And I always start with, asking someone, what are you really passionate about? Because that's really then that's the start to me of making a good investment. It was something that I was really passionate about and could really get my arms around and support and easily want to support. But you're right, through the pandemic, there was so much emphasis and still continues to be on education and health and food and shelter and all of those organizations you would expect. And then coming out now on the back end of this, we hope anyway, sure. We're seeing, arts and culture was severely impacted, but didn't quite get the focus early on from the philanthropic support, rightly so, because things were going to those basic needs, and funding was going to the basic needs. And so now we want to make sure people don't forget about arts and culture because they couldn't have events, they couldn't get ticket revenue. So those areas really need our attention. Another one that we're hearing a lot about is mental health. And that coming out of the pandemic is really an area that we're just every conversation almost here, whether it's with a nonprofit or with a fund holder, there's a lot of interest around it. And it has impacted many of us, many of the people in our families and our friends. And so we all see it. And I think that's why this community and communities everywhere are really thinking about how do we get our arms around this situation, because it is so broad and there are a lot of different resources available. So I think that's something in the future we'll see more convening around in our community too, because there's just a huge need for it. So mental health is another one of an area. And then another area that's recently, been one that needs focus too is the Afghan community and Afghan evacuees who are much in need of support. I just heard that, one of the organizations that's helping in that area just received, I think, nearly a dozen families earlier this week. So, and that's going to continue into the new year. So we work with, the Refugee Empowerment Center and Lutheran Family Services and that whole network of nonprofits who are providing services in that area to try to figure out how can we help, because we do have a refugee fund, and so we're very interested in providing support there.
Yeah, so important. Well, we just have a couple minutes left. Let's talk about what's ahead for the Omaha Community Foundation.
We have a lot of exciting opportunities, Andy. We're just, the pandemic was a good time to step back and pause for everyone and think about what's important. Where do we want to put those limited resources we all have? We embarked on a strategic plan earlier this year. We will be releasing that early next year and going into full implementation and execution mode for our team. So what is different too about our strategic plan is that it really has touched so many people in terms of input into it. So we started by interviewing key stakeholders in the community and getting their thoughts on how do they perceive us now and what role do they think that we potentially have in the future in the community. So we interviewed a couple dozen key stakeholders, got that information, and then worked with our board and our strategic planning committee of our board, as well as our internal team and our entire staff here, having their fingerprint as well on it and providing input and guidance into the future of the organization.
Yeah.
Three key things that came out of that and that we'll be focusing on. One is internal and structure, and we have a need to implement new technology and processes within the organization. It's just, it's an ever-changing thing. At our core, we're a financial services organization. So it's important that we maintain that technology structure and other processes for that backbone so we can do our work and do it efficiently and provide good service. And so that's a second piece. A second focus for us is service. And it's working with our advisor community and our fund holders to make sure that they're aware of all the different product offerings we have and how can we ensure that we're creating the awareness and making those connections. And then the third area of focus within our plan is that community connectedness. Mm-hmm. So that's where our focus in our planning is on our nonprofit community. And how do we just deepen those relationships that we already have in the community, create new ones maybe where we don't, and then help create those connections among all our key stakeholders. So those are our three areas, and that's really going to be a big push for us and providing a lot of focus on where work should be, and also maybe some things that maybe, we look at not putting as many resources in the future too.
No, because you constantly, you have to look at what is, and then you always have to be forward thinking and looking at what can be, what's possible, what do we need to include? Because everything it's just constantly changing, regardless of who you are, what you're doing, but in your organization and the people that you serve, it's always changing. So.
Right. Well, and as you know, Andy, you know better than anybody, this community is so generous, and the generosity here creates big impact and pretty quickly. And you're right. So therefore, the needs in this community are ever changing, and there a lot of people here are hyper focused on those. So we're fortunate to have that, and I'm really fortunate to have a team here who's hyper focused on it too.
Yeah, because are you a little bit over a year? You've been in your position a little over a year?
Yeah, about a year and a half, almost into 2 now.
Okay, almost into 2. All right. First of all, time flies, and especially
pandemic. All in a time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Donna, thank you so much for joining me today and having this conversation. Again, the Omaha Community Foundation does so much for so many. We do have an interview also with you coming up in our last issue of the year of Metro Magazine. So thank you for that. And we'll be sure to have another conversation as we get into the new year and keep people informed on, how they can make a difference. So again, Donna, thank you so much.
Thank you, Andy. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah. All right, folks, we will be right back.